Right. So yeah, so a great pleasure to be here. I was not exactly sure when I prepared this presentation what was the background of everyone. So if you ever have any question about something that I'm presenting that is not clear enough, please ask me. Don't wait till the end, like just ask me. You can cut me while I talk, it's completely okay. And same thing if you feel it's going too slow, so tell me and I will go a bit faster. All right, let me just hide this. Okay, perfect. So quickly a bit about myself. So before 2017, I was doing an engineering degree at Centrale Lille. After that, for my head of studies internship, I came here at Neuropoly. So this was first time in Montreal. And I worked on improving Axon Stack that you may know about. After that, I went back to France. I did an applied mathematics master. Was very fun at NS. After that, I came back here. This I'm doing reinforcement learning at McGill. The subject was about using uncertainty in deep learning for reinforcement learning. A lot of keywords. I'm going to explain some of them, but sadly, I don't have the time to go overboard. It will be way too long as a presentation. It's already way too long as it is. So I'm going to try to cut it short. And since January, I've begun my PhD, as I said before, on uncertainty in deep learning and using that to drive exploration in reinforcement learning. So these are some of the questions that are going to guide this presentation. Mainly, what kind of uncertainty do we expect in a regression task? So do we expect to be uncertain about every input or just some of them, and which one in particular? So I'm going to dive into that. Can a neural network be very uncertain about prediction and outliers and never seen before inputs? Because we will see that the problem with existing techniques is that they don't manage to do so very well. And finally, if we have the time, why and where do we need uncertainty in reinforcement learning? All right, so let's go. As I said, if you have a question, just stop me, no problem. So a quick reminder, like for notation and setting the general context. So in supervised learning, we have an input that lives in a space X. So this can be, the input can be an image, it can be features. So in medical data, it could be a patient. A patient could have an age, height, a medical history, and so this would be the input of our supervised learning algorithm. And the output lives in a space Y. In supervised learning, this can be either a numeric value, as then we talk about doing regression, or it can be a discrete value or a class, and then we talk about classification. So one example of that is, for instance, in Axon DeepStack, we were trying to put a label on every pixel of an image. So the input was an image, and even more precisely, every pixel of an image, and the output was a class for every pixel. So what is important is that in supervised learning, our data set is fixed. So at first, we have a data set D of inputs and outputs, and we want to, and the goal is to try to learn a function f theta here that is going to map X to Y. We do that just in deep learning by minimizing an error criterion that we can call L, for instance. If it can be the mean square error loss. And basically, this just means that we want f theta of X to be close to Y. So we want to learn the mapping from X to Y. So these are the two main classes of supervised learning algorithms, either regression or classification. There are a lot of techniques that exist, but I'm focusing on neural networks, like everyone at Mira. So with neural networks, we have, as a quick reminder, we have an input layer where we put our input. So for instance, here it can be an image. We have a sequence of hidden layers where we are going to transform this input into an hidden representation that we are completely learning. And we have an output layer that is going to give us the result that we are expecting, so our Y. In the case of Axon DeepStack, in input we have an image, and in output we also have an image, so the same dimension. In the case of a regression, we can have as input numeric value, and same thing, a numerical value in output. And we're going to spend a bit more time first on this simple example of regression. So these neural networks, if you take them as is, only output a single value, meaning that if I always feed the same 0.4 here to the neural network, it's going to output, once it's trained, always the same value, 1.7. Thing is, we trained our neural network on a data set, and we expect our neural network to be very precise on this data set. But if the neural network has never learned on another type of data, we expect it to be quite kind of uncertain on this data. Yeah, so for instance, here in a regression task, let's imagine that we have a data set D here of 10 points that are in red. And we have a ground truth function that was used to generate them here in dash black. And we want to estimate the reconstruct this function f, use this function f here using D. So if we just fit one neural network on this data, we could imagine that we had a function that goes like this, for instance, and that just goes down here. But we would like to have an estimate of the uncertainty of our neural network, because between 0 and 0.5 here, we have absolutely no point. And so we have kind of no reason to be sure that the value that the network should predict is minus 0.5, for instance. So one way to do that is to use ensembles. So let me just go back here. So with ensembles, what we can do is we can train several neural networks that have the same architecture, but that you initialize differently. So with different random seeds. So you give them the same data set. You just change the initialization conditions on the neural networks. And they're going to be able to give some different outputs after training, because they've been because their optimization happened in different conditions. If we do that, we can then take for a given input, we can take the set of outputs that they predict and compute on the statistics like the mean or the standard deviation, or for instance, 2 times the standard deviation. And this is going to give us an estimate of the uncertainty of our ensemble on this input value of 0.4. So if we go back here, we drew an estimate of this uncertainty. You can see that around minus 0.5 and between minus 0.5 and 0.0, this is where we have all the data. The standard deviations are really low, meaning that all our networks agree that the right function to approximate should pass like this. So this is interesting. This is good. Since we trained on this data, we expect our networks to be sure that this is exactly the right function. And we can see that between 0.0 and 0.5 here, they begin to disagree, and we see that the standard deviation is getting higher. However, there is one problem here. You can see that the ground truth function here is absolutely not covered in the standard deviation that we drew, and this is problematic because even though this function exists, because this is the one we used to draw these samples, draw these 10 points here, if we train a neural network, like an infinite amount of neural networks on this data, we're never going to get one that could maybe approximate this. They're all going to look still kind of the same, meaning that they're all going to go down here. And this is one of the problems that we want to tackle and that we try to tackle in the work that I'm going to present. So just quickly, the training procedure here is that we train 50 small neural networks. So just multi-layer perceptrons. There is no convolutional layers that we may have seen in some vision neural networks. It's just the same architecture as this one here. And so we train 50 of them, and we predict then the value between minus 2.5 and 2.5, and we plot the first, second, and first standard deviations. So the first method that you can use to incorporate an uncertainty other than ensembles method is called dropout. So this is a technique that has been used here by Melanie believe in her work when she was doing active learning. And the idea is that you have a neural network on the left, and you're going to shut down randomly during training some of the neurons. But because these neurons are shut down randomly, you're going to get an output here that depends on the neurons you shut down. So this output is going to be stochastic. It's going to change depending on the, you can say, the mask that we apply here that is going to shut down these neurons. So usually, this dropout is used as a regularization technique, and you can, so you use it to have a network that generalizes better. But we can also use it at test time. So this was found in 2015. And this is going to give us, even at test time, outputs that are random. And we can wonder, okay, but are they going to be random if I apply input from the data set? Or are they going to be around the same value consistently, which would be nice, because this would mean that we have an estimator that is always going to predict the same value when this is an input that we've seen. And on the contrary, if this is an input that you've never seen, are the networks still going to produce the same value? So this is the same graph, same task here, but we use dropout. And you can see the estimate of uncertainty that we get. And you can see that this is not entirely satisfying, mainly because here you can see that the uncertainty is slightly growing, even though we have 3 points out of 10 here. Like, it's a lot of data compared to our small data set. And we know that there is no noise here. We know that these are the true values. And there is no reason for our networks when we apply dropout at inference time, there is no reason for them to be unsure. Yeah, they should be pretty sure that this is the right value. Yeah.
That depends. So first of all, that depends on the dropout, right? On the amount of dropout.
Yeah.
And also what you're looking at is accuracy, not necessarily precision, right? Because you know that the precision will be lower if your dropout increases, if your dropout increases, for example. So is your question really to look for good accuracy, and basically, or the extent of your standardization?
So I'd say it's really both. Like, we really want to have a model that keeps a good accuracy when you average all the dropout estimates. Because even if you apply dropout, in the end, what you would like is a high uncertainty here, in this region where we have no data points, but a very low uncertainty here because we have these data points. So you still want this precision, this accuracy.
I mean, you have those data points, but on the other hand, I mean, the uncertainty it's not a probabilistic representation of uncertainty, right?
It's not.
So these standard deviations should be scaled somehow. We don't really know how to scale them, but I'm not shocked by having some loss of precision because you had some dropout, right? As long as the accuracy is correct, I'm not sure why you're unsatisfied by these results.
Okay, what do you mean by precision here?
It's basically the standard deviation.
Okay, the standard deviation. Well, I argue that this is not exactly like the standard deviations that you would like to see. For instance, if you used a Gaussian process, it's a shame I didn't include a picture, but if you train a Gaussian process on these data points, a Gaussian process, if you are not familiar with it, is a machine learning technique that is going to also predict a mean that you could see here, for instance, as the purple line, and the standard deviations, so predictive standard deviation that you could see as I could see here. And ideally, what the Gaussian process would predict is a standard deviation of absolutely 0 here, because there is no reason to be uncertain if you've got the data points right, and if you know that there is no noise. Why would you? You would like?
So because these are the data for the training set, I guess.
Yeah.
Why you would not expect.
Yeah. If it's the data you've trained on, you don't want to be uncertain about it. You know the true value. So once again, assuming that you're not going to, that there is no noise on your data, right? If there is noise on the data, that is another concern. But it's true that here, like there is no noise.
So your dashed lines is your data. You don't have any distribution around it.
So so the dash line is the exact ground truth function. And from this ground truth function, I chose 10 points randomly between -0.5 and 0.0. And this was my axis in my data set and my y is here. And so at least this is my problem with this standard deviation, is that we are, okay, like this standard deviation is getting higher out of the data set, but inside the data set, it's not always lower what it really should be. And we're losing information for nothing. So dropout happens to be very well backed by theory, but it's in the case of a single layer neural network with an infinite width. And sadly, like this is not what we have here. I have, I think, 50 neurons, maybe 64. It's absolutely not infinite width. And in reality, we're not going to have infinite width. So at least for us, this was not satisfactory. And also something that I don't mention, but the problem with dropout is that as an estimator, it doesn't concentrate, meaning that the more data we have, and it's not going to improve our knowledge of the true value we're trying to estimate. So a quick example, let's say I have a coin that I'm flipping several times. It's a fair coin. So the average, if I take the average of my results, let's say that I gain 0 if it's heads and 1 if it's tails. If I average the results, I should have 0.5 because it's a fair coin, right? This is my true average. The problem is that if you use dropout, you're never going to be sure that 0.5 is the true average, even though you consistently launch a coin an infinite amount of time. You're never going to be sure, which is very problematic for an estimator. You want it, if you have an infinite amount of data, you would like to have the exact average, the exact expectation of your random variable. But this is just about this example. Dropout is very useful in practice because it's really easy to implement. And this is a one-dimensional example. Of course, in high dimensions, some things are, it doesn't exactly behave the same way. It's just that we saw that in one dimension, for one dimension, it's kind of problematic that we don't get this nice uncertainty that we expect. Anyway, a second type of uncertainty that we can get is using bootstrapping. So here, bootstrap in a statistical sense, is about having a data set G. You're going to draw with replacements points from this data set and create several bootstrap samples. And in statistics, at least, you would get a statistics for this first bootstrap sample, one for the second, etc. And you would get a bootstrap distribution of the statistics. In deep learning, what you would do is that you would, so we're back to our ensemble methods. We want to train 50 different neural networks. So what we're going to do is that we're going to train the first one on the first bootstrap sample of our data set, the second one on the second bootstrap sample, and etc. So all neural networks are trained on almost the same data, but not exactly. The data sets are very alike, but they're not exactly the same. And this gives us uncertainty also. So this is what we would get with bootstrapping uncertainty. So bootstrapping also has nice guarantees, maybe even more so than dropout. But once again, is this really the uncertainty that we are looking for? Because you can see that here I took one prediction from one neural network that I drew. You can see that this neural network was not trained on these two data points. They were not part of the bootstrap data set that we had. So we are completely ignoring them.
But what's the 1.0?
Okay. It's 1.0 because with bootstrap, what you do is that you draw with replacement from the data set. Additionally, this is what they do here. So they also subsample, meaning that if here like they have 50 points, here they only take 10. I'm taking 50. So my 0.0 is my fraction of points that I keep. So I'm keeping 50. So we are ignoring those 2 points here, which makes this uncertainty once again be very high, even though we have points here and here. And so we have very high uncertainty where we have a lot of data here, and just 3 points out of 10, but with more points it would be the same. So this is once again problematic. And this can be summarized by I guess by this image. So imagine that here we drew our input space X. Okay. So and now my inputs are images. So these are images from the MNIST dataset, which is very used in machine learning, which are handwritten digits. This is from another dataset that is just pictures from numbers. So you can see that in both cases here we have numbers, like we have a 2. If we have a neural network that wants to that we want to train to be able to predict to detect which digit it is, we expect it if we train it on MNIST here. We would it would be perfect if we was able also to detect that this is a 2, right? This would be a generalization. Like we want it to be able, if it's a 2, we want, even if it's not exactly from the same data set, it should be all right because these 2 and the 2 here are close enough. However, for a point that is not in the training distribution, like this A, for instance, or this Japanese character, we don't know what we would like our neural network to, what we would like the output to be. And actually, we would like our ensemble of neural network, for instance, or our neural network with dropout to be very uncertain about its predictions on these characters because it makes no sense. Like this is not a 2, this is not a 3, not a 5. This is something else. So in the end, we want to have a very low uncertainty and be able to generalize in distribution. So here, where we have the data, but out of distribution here, we want to have a high uncertainty. And so this is what we try to, so this is what we tackle in this work. Just a second. Okay. All right. So this was the subject of the paper that we've prepared with my supervisor. So it's a joint work with Audrey Durand, Vincent François Lavé, and Joël Pinot. And the goal is to enforce high uncertainty out of distribution while maintaining a low uncertainty in distribution. And we're going to first look at the regression techniques and so compare with this example that we just saw. And after that, quickly show how this would extend to classification techniques and a kind of reinforcement learning that is called imitation learning. So we're going to use ensembles because if we go back, we saw that ensembles already have begin to have the solution here. The uncertainty goes, it's higher here, it's still very low here. It's just that here we don't manage to go all the way. And here, Julien, you said something very true, that it's just about scaling here. That we could scale the uncertainty and maybe have something, where you have a measure. If I take 10 standard deviations here, I would cover this curve. But the fact is that if I just train a neural network, I'm never going to have one that's approximated. Yeah. So it's more than just estimating the standard deviation. It's also about being able to train a neural network that actually covers this ground truth function. Okay. And what we're going to do is that we're going to add a term in the training loss of the neural network to force diversity out of distribution. So first, we have to make some simplifications. The first one being that if we want high uncertainty, high uncertainty for points that are out of distribution for our ensemble of, let's say, 3 neural networks, we would like basically each neural network to be very different one from all the others, so that they all disagree on the data. This can be difficult to implement because this requires training all the networks of the ensemble at the same time, jointly, so that they always differ one from the other, where we would like to train them sequentially, or at least be able to. So we're going to relax and say that we are only going to require each neural network to be different from one reference function. And if they're all different from one reference function, hopefully they're also going to differ one from the others. This is not obligatory, like they could look alike, but because of the stochastic optimization process and the randomness in the optimization, in the initialization, hopefully we're going to get different functions. Okay. So this is a loss that we use to train each of the neural network of the ensemble. So the first part is your classical error loss that you use in a neural network. So this could just be your mean square error. So basically you're training f so that f of xy is close to yi. And because you're trying to minimize this loss, you're trying to minimize the distance between f of xy and yi. So you're just trying to enforce this closeness between f of xy and yi. If I forget this part, this is just a regular neural network. So if I set lambda equals 0 and I train an ensemble using this formula, I just getting back to the first picture that we saw of the ensembles and the uncertainty. Now we are adding a second term here, which is a similarity loss. And we're saying that on top of this term, we also want our network that we are training, f of x, to be, we want it to be different from this g of x. G of x is going to be our reference function that we defined before. And so this k is what we call a similarity function, and is going to have a high value if f of x and g of x predict the same values, basically. And if they predict values that are very different one from another, this is going to be low, this is going to be equal to 0. And we will have achieved our goal since the loss will be low, because f and g will be different. So now, the last thing that we need to take care of is where to actually compute this difference. Because if we remind ourselves, we actually want to be different, f and g to be different, not in distribution here, where we have our data, but out of distribution, right? We don't want f and g to disagree. We don't want all the networks to disagree on the data that we are training on, because we want them to all predict the same value. We want them to disagree on this space here. Problem is that we don't have access to this space. We don't know in advance what we're going to apply our network on. So one paper that came out recently proposes a proxy, which is to choose points that lie at the border of the current data set. And saying if we choose points that are at the border of the current data set, and we tell our network to be different one from another at this border, we expect the uncertainty that we will get there to propagate to the rest of the space. So this is a bit end-wavy as a justification. That's right. A bit sadly like everything in your networks, but this is at least backed by this paper that just got accepted at a conference that's specialized on this subject, and so we tried to implement that and see what was.
So this basically works only for basically numbers, like a space of continuous one-dimensional numbers, right?
Can
you imagine applying that to images, for example?
Yeah, we did. So we did, but this is an interesting question, and it would ideally we would like to apply it indeed on numbers, and with images it poses problem. So I'm going to present next slide what we did with images. But there is a follow-up work that we want to do that would focus on just numbers, treating images just as numbers. I'm going to talk quickly about that if I have time. So basically, you can imagine that your dataset D here is contained inside this blue circle. All the points are here into D, and we're going to add noise, just add noise to it. So this is just an illustration of what we said before. So this would be the space covered by our repulsive points now. So we, if we sample inside D here, we're going to be sometimes here, sometimes here, sometimes here, so sometimes around. But when we sample, when we take a point that is at the border, the border, and we add noise, sometimes we're going to get this point, which is out of the distribution this time. And the second possibility is to just choose, in the case of images from another data set. Because images from another data set are out of distribution. And these are not necessarily the images we want to evaluate our uncertainty on, but they are still images that are out of distribution. And hopefully, like if we are different enough on these images here, for instance, I'm training on MNIST, so on these digits, and I'm forcing the networks to differ on this dataset, which is called fashionalist, which is just pictures of clothes.
So in that example, how do you assess that the particular point in D will be close to the blue line? So like in the example of the NIST data set,
yeah.
How does like an image from the NIST look like when it's at the border, when it's at the on the edge?
Oh, okay. So
blue curve.
So I think this would be the images that you have troubles. I think that these two here, for instance, is already sorry, not these two. These are images that are not easily classifiable, I guess.
It seems like a chicken and egg problem in the sense that you're trying to define uncertainty by defining uncertainty on your data set.
I'm not sure.
By placing, if there's a NIST data that looks like no number, then you would say, oh, that this guy is probably pretty close to my blue patch. That's what you're suggesting.
So how we do is that we actually just sample points from the whole MNIST set. We don't care to find which one are at the border or not, and we are not basically with noise to them. At least in this case, yeah. What I would do is that I would just, let's get back to here. I would just take a randomly a point. So for instance, this one. So it's here. I would add noise on it. So I would end up somewhere around here. So which is still in the data set, right? And I would apply my repulsive loss here. So yeah, this is problematic, right? Because I'm saying that I want my networks to differ in my training sets. But this is okay because even if this, if we have this objective here, we still have this one, right? So this one is going, if this one repulses the functions, this one is going to make them closer. So we're going to have the reverse effects. However, sometimes we're going to sample points that are at the border. Sometimes when I choose randomly one of these 10 points, sometimes I'm going to choose this one. So this one is at the border by definition. And by adding noise to this one, sometimes I'm going to push to say that this is the point I want my networks to disagree. And this is out of distribution. So this works because we have these two objectives that are opposed to each other. And the only time where they don't oppose each other is when this X here is actually sampled out of distribution, which is going to happen sometimes. But this happens during the training. All right. Okay. So this is what we get, for instance, with the technique. This is a very simple example, and Wendy. So I don't think it's particularly impressive, but I think it shows what the uncertainty that we actually expect here. You can see that here we don't have a lot of points, so the uncertainty actually grows, right? Here we have points here, and we have a very low uncertainty. And in this case here, we don't have any points, and the uncertainty goes high again. I drew once again a sample function. You can see in purple here. You can see that this sample function it goes all the way down, but sometimes one of these functions most likely goes all the way up here and actually could cover this function, at least the beginning here. And here we get this, we get a sense of diversity of the networks that we train. Does this make sense? You can say no.
So does the recursive, is it like related to the lambda?
Oh, this factorial?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the function we have a lambda here that lets us balance the repulsive force that we are applying and the attractive force, which is
So
error
I guess
loss.
you play with like this lambda, and then you chose the one that makes sense.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. We're going. So this is also just an illustrative regression problem. Of course, like we had to choose a lambda, and so we tried with different lambda, and this is a lambda that makes this work pretty well. That's right. Thing is, we also tried to choose different bootstrapping rates, for instance, or different dropout rates, and we never found, and there is no dropout rate that is going to give us a high uncertainty here. That doesn't break completely our uncertainty here.
What's the expression of the G function?
Oh yeah, sorry. So the G function that we choose here is just the output of a regular neural network that you train without this repulsive constraint.
Okay.
So it's just a regular neural network. So for instance, one of the simple ensemble that we get at first. Yeah. All right. Let me go quickly to the switch quickly to the outlier detection in a classification setting. So now we have images, and we want to do kind of the same thing with images. Yeah. So I'm training on this MNIST dataset, and I want to predict which digit it is based on the images that I see. I would like to be able to predict well on SVation here on this dataset because it's also a tube, but I want to be very uncertain on this and these datasets, right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to use the same neural networks as before. The only difference is that now our repulsive points are going to be chosen from a dataset that is called EMNIST, that is basically letters. But that is also 28 by 28 here in black and white, just like this one. And yeah, that's it. And we're going to evaluate the certainty on this dataset that is called not MNIST. And this dataset, this is Kutsudishi MNIST, basically. So here we would like our predictions to be very uncertain on not MNIST and Kutsudishi MNIST, and be quite certain on MNIST and the test set on MNIST. So how do we evaluate that? So let's say that I have 3 neural networks in my ensemble here. I get one input point x1, so it can be our 2 here, for instance. And let's say I have 3 classes. It's either a 1, a 2, or a 3. So my 3 neural networks would give this. One would give these probabilities, one this one, this one. I can average these probabilities. So in average of my ensemble, the ensemble is saying that there is a 0.5% chance that it is the first class, 40% chance that it is the second, and 10% it is the third. And to measure how uncertain my ensemble is, I'm computing the entropy on this probability vector. I didn't put the formula of the entropy, but basically, if the entropy is high, it means that this probability vector is very close to being uniform, so very close to saying I don't know actually which class it is. And if the entropy is very low, so close to 0.0, it means that my ensemble is very certain of my predictions. So for instance, for another input point here I would have this network is very certain that it is 0.9, that it is a third class, that x2 corresponds to the class number 3. This network is absolutely certain that it is class 3, and this one is also very certain. So we get the average probability vector would be this one. And if I compute the entropy, I get 0.2, which is very much lower. I do that for every point in each of these data sets here. So let's say I'm working on not MNIST. So for each point x1, x2, I'm computing this entropy value. And after that, I compute an histogram of the entropy values. Yeah. So yeah, in APSIS, you've got the right, the entropy values. And here, like it's an histogram, so it could be the density, it could be the number of samples that are actually. So here with x1 is at 0.95, it's located here, close to 1. x2 is 0.2, it's located here. And when you look at that, you can say, okay, my ensemble puts a lot of the predictions of my ensemble are pretty uncertain because they are around 1.0, right? If my neural network was absolutely certain of himself, all the values of entropy would be around 0.0, 0.1, 0.2, and you would have a lot of mass here and very few mass here. So do just a regular ensemble methods are ensemble methods efficient? So to detect outliers. So are they sure of themselves basically sorry. And we can see that they are here. So this is applied to the MNIST dataset. So once again, we trained on MNIST here, and now we are testing on the test set on MNIST. So we did not train on these exact examples, but they are indistinguishable of these ones. It's just train set test set. We're trying to see if we generalize. And if we look here, just an ensemble method is very sure of itself. Even with 10 neural networks, if we take the average prediction, the entropy is still very low, which means that their neural network is very sure of himself, which is good. It means that we are still sure of what we are predicting, even if it's an input that we've never seen, but it's an input that looks like what we've been trained on. So we want to be sure of our predictions here. And what if it's an input that we've never seen? So this is the same thing, but applied on not MNIST. So we can see that if we have 10 neural networks in our ensemble, here we get a probability mass that is much more to the right, is much more dispersed. So this means that our ensemble is actually pretty uncertain about these predictions. You can see that dropout, not so much. You have a peak here, which means that for a lot of points, it's actually very certain of the predictions, even though this is the predictions on not MNIST, okay? So I don't want to be sure of my prediction on this A. This is not a 2, this is not a 3. This is, I don't know what it is from the point of my neural network. But even then, if you take just one neural network, you're always going to be sure that this is something, which is problematic. Oh, the slide is missing here. Okay. That's unfortunate. This is the slide with our results. Did I move it? I think I moved it. So I'm not going to go the way, no worries. Okay. All right. So, okay. That's unfortunate. So we do better. Okay, I will try to find it after. Let's just go back. It appeared. Okay. So yeah, actually you have to imagine that we do better. Okay. Yeah, all right. Okay. I go after. Okay, last quick example. Okay, all right. There's a bunch of slides missing here. Okay. Last quick example. What if we are trying to... Oh, I'm missing my introduction slide. Okay. Okay. So the last example is about, it's called imitation learning. Basically, here we are going to try to control this arm here to get to these targets. Okay. And basically, the experiment we did is that we're going to train our network on controlling the arm so that it always manages to reach this target. Okay, yeah. The thing is, what happens if we change the color of this target? Or what happens if we change the shape? If I change the color of the target, I'd like my network to be uncertain about the action, about whether it should go there or not. Because, for instance, if you are in the forest and you want to eat mushrooms, and you're used to eat a red one, but the blue one appears, you would like to avoid eating this one. You're not sure. So you would like maybe to look in the book to check if actually this is edible or not. Yeah, and so what if it changes shape? It's the same reasoning. All right, so a regular neural network, so same logic here. This is the entropy predictions. We are looking at the generalization of our neural network. You can see that it's very certain of its predictions, whereas our neural network begins to be more uncertain. So here there is a trade-off. We are losing certainty. However, if we change the target color, we can see that our regular ensemble here, if you compare, is even more certain of its predictions. Well, you should not. Like the color is actually an important feature of the image. And here we're saying that our ensemble is even more certain of what it's predicting. But if we compare to our solution, you can see that here we actually are way more uncertain. So these are for two values of lambda. We are way more certain of our predictions. So here we are gaining something that we did not have with regular ensembles, which is that we are now able to see if the target has actually changed or not, and if we should predict something, or maybe we should just ask for guidance by a human, for instance, in the sense of controlling this harm. And what if the target shape has changed? But we can see that here we also get better results, which is interesting, because it means that even though we just changed the shape of the image, our network ensemble is still able to be uncertain and very highly uncertain on the correct action to take, much more so than a regular deep ensemble. Right, so I'm going to stop here. I'm absolutely sorry for the last part because I'm missing the conclusion of my second and the beginning of my third, and I don't think this made any sense, but I'm happy to answer questions about it. I have absolutely not the time to go after, but that's okay. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
If you have questions about this, I'm happy to answer.
Yes,
Yep.
I didn't quite catch the explanation on how the two terms on your loss, with like the normal loss and the similarity loss.
Yeah.
How you said that for the points from the data set, the similarity loss won't be that important because it will be evened out, or like it appears a lot, but for the points on the side, it will be more important. So.
Okay, so let's say that here I'm sampling these recursive points, and so remember that these recursive points can be sampled from inside this red circle here. So sometimes I'm going to sample them inside D. So I'm going to force my networks to disagree in the data set, whereas I would not want to. Right? I want in the data set, I want my networks to agree. I want to have a very low uncertainty. Right? So okay, so this here we're going to have positive loss. So there's going to be an error, okay? But we're not going to always sample from inside the blue inside the blue circle, right? Sometimes you also sample from here. And at the same time, even if we sample sometimes inside this data set, because it's inside the data set, sometimes we're going to sample the same points or close by points that are here inside the data set. So here we have this error loss that is forcing our networks to agree. So this means that even if sometimes we force them to disagree here, this is going to vanish because for the next optimization steps, we're going to see here examples that forces the networks to agree again.
And you never agree on the points from the X dataset.
No, because
Okay.
no, that's it. You can't agree on this because here we don't have actually
Okay.
any attraction attraction term in the law that forces the network to agree. So here is going to continue to disagree. And the rationale is that this disagreement here is going to propagate here out
Okay.
in the rest of my input space.
What framework are you using for implementation?
PyTorch. I'm using PyTorch. Highly recommend.
Like usually in the lab, this is this is like a bias from the Facebook.
I don't think so. I don't think so because Mila is very big, much more than just Joel's group,
Yeah.
and
It's also
almost everyone is using PyTorch. Yeah, I think it's really a great framework to do deep learning research, much more than TensorFlow. And Keras, I think Keras is good. I've never tried it, but I think PyTorch is maybe easier to tweak. You can do difficult things with PyTorch that you maybe you would have more difficulty doing in Keras. But again, I'm going to use the authority argument, but I think that Christian was very convincing about using PyTorch, and I think I can agree with him now. Yeah. Yeah, so that's an Axon DeepSec you were thinking about switching to either Keras or PyTorch.
Yeah. So Vazudel is actually currently working on that. So maybe you guys can have a chat.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
All right, any more questions? Thank you very much, Maxime, again.
Thank you,
Valerie, timing.
Perfect timing. All right.